Very good morning to all. This is going to be a webinar by Ivy Professional School on how to create powerful reports in minutes. So this is a series that we are going to continue, in which we start with the basic, how to create a basic reports, how to make it more effective by using some of the tools in Excel, followed by then we'll get into something called Power Pivots in the later on series of this webinar. Now, if anybody is working in a corporate world, and how many of you are working professionals? If I can get a, nobody's working. Anybody who's online who's a working professional? Karan, Neetu, Samrat, Harmeet, Jay, Amit. Karan is okay. So anybody who is a working professional would agree with me that probably 50 to 60% of our work involves a lot of reporting. Either we are the creators of those reports, if we are just starting our career in, let's say, 5 years at least, or we are busy in reading the reports. So reports and summaries are very, very important. Can anybody tell me why it is important? Why do we do so much of reporting?
To understand what the data is, how the data is, to study the data.
To study the data, absolutely. So we have a large amount of data that we accumulate on a daily basis. And with that large amount of data, we need to make some business decisions. Now, if I look at the data itself, I may not be able to make any decision out of that, right? Because I'm getting daily transactions, and probably if you're working with company like a telecom company like Airtel, I'm making data recording in every second. Every second someone is talking to someone, sending a text, using a data, right? So much of data is getting accumulated that how do we get an insight? So the first thing that we have to do is create reports. And which tool would you recommend for creating a powerful report? Excel. Okay, what in Excel would you use? Because again, we can summarize the data in Excel by multiple methods. So which method in Excel would you prefer? Pivot tables, right? So that is the reason when it comes to reports, our reports, we focus a lot on pivot table, because those helps us not to even only make reports quickly, but they're error free, because human calculation part is taken away. So we can make very simple reports in which we are just doing a total of certain elements, to the part where we are doing calculations and creating a new field in a pivot table. So that is going to be the basically the starting point of these webinars. Okay, moving on. So like we were discussing, we are going to talk about pivot table in this particular webinar. Now what I plan to cover in this pivot table webinar is not only to talk about a basic pivot table, but teach you some of the things that are available in pivot table through some reports out of a particular data. So I'm going to tell you, okay, this is a report that I need. Now would I get a similar report in pivot table through the workings, right? So why pivot tables? Obvious choice, large amount of data that we have on a daily basis. To crunch the data, time is required, accuracy is required of the person who wants to crunch the data. Secondly, we need to crunch the data. It's not that we can get rid of it, because we want to get insights from the summary that is there. Thirdly, it's very difficult to manipulate some of the data because of, again, too many parameters which are required in our reports in the summaries. And the third thing is, if I don't use a pivot table, if I do manually the summary, for example, I can use some tools in Excel like a countifs and a sumif or database functions to summarize my data, but that is very, very time consuming. And some people don't even do that. People like to do sorting and filtering for some reason. So that's a very primitive way of crunching the data over here. So what we are going to do, we are going to try and create some reports today. So I have taken a data set. I'm going to open the data set now. Okay, let's read the data, because before you make any kind of reports or before you can understand those questions, it is going to be very important to understand what are the fields that are given to me, what are the headers given to me. So I've got a region. Within each region, there are various markets that are there. Within each market, there are some branches. There are customer numbers who are going to branches and buying the products or the services. We have the customer name, which city the customer belongs to, which state it is belonging to, what product number did we pick up, what is the description of the service we took, what business segment it belongs to, then what is the service date, what was the invoicing date, what is the sales amount, contracted hours, how many were there, what was the sales period, and who was the sales rep. So this information that you see over here is a data of a facility management services. So basically the company gets hired by various people or organizations to do like things like landscaping, fleet management, and so on and so forth, right? So they're being hired. And this data is almost 68,000 rows of data. So now if anybody is going to look at this data and would want some answers from this data, first I have to summarize to give those answers, right? Now anybody who is the first time user of pivot table, let me tell you one thing. Pivot table is one of the easiest tool in Excel to learn. However, the problem with pivot table is that it never gives you an error. That is a problem. Why? Because whatever you give to pivot table, it will digest and give you output. Now you will not come to know whether what it gave us is what I needed really or not. Okay. So anybody who starts with the pivot table, I always recommend that to become good in pivot table, what you guys need to do is visualize the output. Until unless you do not know what is my aim, what kind of summary am I aiming at, if you don't visualize, working in pivot table will become more and more tougher for you guys, right? And there are only few type of tables that can be created or that we want to create either when we are in our school or colleges or when we are working in our organization. Okay, so what are the typical layouts or what are the typical summaries that we create? One summary is that if I would have the headers on the top, and then I have the data flowing from top to bottom, right? This is called a vertical table. Why it is called a vertical table? Because my data flows vertically top to bottom. Then another kind of table then which we can create is something like this, in which my fields or headers are in one column, and I may have my data flowing left to right like this. This is called a horizontal table, right? Third type of table could be a combination of both, in which I may have some headers in one row and some headers in a column. So let's say I've got headers in the row and some headers in the column, and the data is obviously going to be in the middle over here, and this is called a two-way table. And the fourth type is if I have a group table, if the grouping is done. So let's say if I make one group over here, and the group can have further subdivision. So for example, this can be one of the programs. In a program, you guys are enrolled in different modules. In each module, what is the marks that we get, right? Or if you're talking about a regional sales, we have different regions. In each region, we have different markets, like what we saw in the data. And in the market, what is the total sales? So all these kind of layouts we can create. So the aim is to first think about the layout that we are going to create and then move with the pivot table. Okay, so let's try to answer the first question that we have. And the first question that we have is, how many services were done for different business segment in each city? Okay, let's visit our Excel sheet again. So we have got something called business segments, right? We have, I think, approximately 3 business segments that we have, and there is a date called service date. So I want to find out how many services were done for different business segment in each city. So to understand in each city what kind of business segment is in more in demand. So how do we run about it? So how do we use pivot tables? Click in any one cell. Anytime in Excel that you are working, try to remain in one cell and not more than that. Do not try to spend your energy on selecting the table because Excel is smart enough to pick your tables. Then we go over here on insert. We go to the table and then we click on pivot table. So the first thing to check is whether it picked my entire set of table or not. If the answer is yes, then you move on to the second thing to know whether it is going to, whether you want it on a new sheet or a existing worksheet. Now when you say existing worksheet, it could be this worksheet, raw data, or it could be any worksheet. Any worksheet of any workbook or only this workbook. Any worksheet of any workbook. Okay. So if you have a workbook which is open, so let me do this thing. I have a new workbook which is open. So I can have the data in one place and I can have a pivot table report in another place. Sometimes, this is a very common thing that we try to do. We try to segregate our data from our work. I don't want where my data is the same place, my tables also to appear, my summaries also to appear. I don't want that. So if I want to make it work in some other workbook, let it open up. Okay, finally. So let's see, insert, same step, on the very left, table, pivot table. I can click on existing sheet. Now what existing sheet asks for is one starting position of the cell. It could be in the same worksheet where you worked and you have to give one starting cell, or like I was trying to explain it to you, that you can go to any of the workbook which is open and go to any sheet of that workbook and say, hey, this is where I want to start my pivot table. All that is required is one single cell of any open workbook, any worksheet. Right? Once we have done that, then we can click on OK and we get a basic structure for the pivot table. A lot of times when we work, we get this style of pivot table, which is not a very drag and drop friendly, because when we drag and drop, it does not allow to do so. So how do we change it? Because this is the style that we had back in old days of Excel. This is not a very fun style. We would want drag and drop things to change. We get a good summary. If you don't like it, we should be able to change again. How do we change this? So what we are going to change is this display settings that you have to modify a little bit. So we click on the right click, pivot table options, display, and we click on the classic pivot table layout. Classic pivot table layout is the one in which you can easily drag and drop, and in fact you will be able to see these areas, which is a column and a row and a value and a filter, easily on the table itself, and you can drag and drop. Okay, so once this is set, what do I drop where? What should I drop where? Again, let's revisit our typical table styles that we were looking at. So when you create a table, what do you focus on? We focus on creating headers, and underneath the headers, we want the summaries of values to come up. Right? Now, how do I get the headers, or what are the headers? Headers are nothing but the values of your field. So when you talk about pivot table, there are certain terminologies that we should be aware of. For example, all the headers. What are they called? These headers are called fields in pivot tables. Then the values that you have underneath the fields are called the items of the pivot table. Now when we say we want to create headers, headers are created by what? The items of the field. Okay, because when I drop a field of region, what will I get as a header is a west, a north, south, and so on and so forth. Okay, so what are we going to drop over here in the row field or the column field? The field whose headers or whose items I want to use as headers. Right? Now if I pick and drop a field and drop it in the row, which kind of table would I get if I put my headers in one column? I'll get a horizontal table, right? If I pick the same field but I want to put it in a column, then I'll get a vertical table. And if I pick one for row and I pick one for column, I get two-way table. And if I push more than one field in the same area, be it a row or a column, I get grouped. Okay, so this is how we create our basic structures. So what are we going to put in fields? The row and a column, something by which I want to create my headers of the basic table. And now what kind of table I want? That's why I was telling you the first step of pivot table should be to visualize the output. Because if you got the output correctly in your head, this thing takes less than 1 minute. Hardly 1 minute it will take you. Okay? And what do you put in drop fields? Drop value. What do you want to calculate?
Some of the values are counted.
Some of the values of the count of the values. So what do we put over here? The field whose summary we would like to see. If I say I want to find total sales, then sales become my value over here. Right? If I want to say I want to find the average profit, then profit becomes my field over here. If I say I want to count the services, then the services becomes the field over here. So whatever you want, the summary of comes in the drop value part. Should it be a text or number field, or it could be anything? Like for example, market is a text field. It's got all text data in it. Versus if I go to sales amount, has the numbers in it. So what should I drop over here? A text field or a number field, or doesn't matter? It doesn't matter. Okay. So if I drop a text field over here, what it will do? It will count. So basically what happens in this area of pivot table, you will see that you will never get a text value. Never. Because what this area is meant for is for summarization. So summarization has to be done through the mathematical function of sum, average, max, min, standard deviation, variation, average, count. All these things are used. So over here, if I drop a field which has numbers in it, by default, what it does a sum. And if I would have dropped a field which has text in it, by default, what it does is a count. Yes? So this is your basic working in a pivot table. Now let's try to answer the question that we started this session with. So this is a basic pivot table. The question we want to answer is how many services were done for different business segments in each city. So as soon as you are asked to create a summary or you guys are asked to create a report, the first tool and the only tool should come to your mind is pivot table. The first attempt has to be made by pivot table. Why I am saying the first attempt? Because unfortunately, not all the companies' data structure is such that it can support pivot tables. Because if I don't record, like for example, if I don't make a column of month, but I make different columns for each month, and I want to summarize based on month, my pivots cannot do that. So it completely depends on what kind of structures the companies are creating also. And trust me, you can't go to a company and tell, past 50 years you've done this, let's change how it works. You can't. So we have to be more innovative and, find out other Excel methods to do that. But first attempt should be to try pivot tables on it. With a little manipulation of data also it can be done, let's do that. Because nothing is faster and easier than a pivot. Okay, how many services were done for different business segments in each city? What kind of table are we visualizing? Business segments in different cities. What kind of table? Grouped? Okay, so we want a group table. So city would be there, business segment would be there, and then we have to count the services. Okay, let's do this. So what do you want to place where? City in the rows. Then I want the business segments. So the business segments would come in the rows. Okay. And once I've done this, now for each city, each business segment, I wish to find how many services were done. So how do I find that? So in New York, how many times the maintenance and repair work came to me? How do I find that?
Put the same business segment in the value.
So you're going to put the business segment again over here in the drop value. Okay. Now you have to understand one thing, that when you are putting any field which has text in it, if you put any field which has text in it, it does a default function of count. Now when you count, counting can be done on any column. Whether you count a column of business segment or you would have counted invoices. If you are counting invoicing or if you're counting the product description, you count on any of the column, it will still remain the same, right? So pick and drop anything. So we've got an answer to the question that we were trying to, or the summary that we were trying to look for, that in each city, in each business segment, how many services were done. Now if I would like to find out in each city which is the most availed service, then how do I do it? The question is, if I want to find out, okay, if I talk about New York, which is the business segment which is called for the most?
Yeah, we just see from the data.
You would see from the data, but what would be the easier way of seeing from the data? Order, sorting. So what should you sort it as?
Descending order.
You should do it largest to smallest,
Yeah.
right? Descending order.
Descending order.
That's correct. So I can say, okay, New York, maintenance and repair, Seattle, landscaping is more. So that if I want to do a promote a business, or you want to deploy or employ more people, I know which segment to cater to. So pivot tables, though they are very popularly known as a tool of reporting, but I think they're an excellent tool for analysis and getting answers out of it. Simply by using a pivot, if I do a simple job of inserting a chart, if I simply insert chart, okay, this is a little messy because the number of cities are way too much. But if the number of cities were little less, okay, let me reduce it. Let's say 6 cities are there. Now if we try to insert a chart, it's coming up much neater because the less number of city. Now even I don't have to look at the numbers. After creating a pivot table, if I create a corresponding chart with it, I can easily find the answers to my question. New York, maintenance, Seattle, landscaping, and so on and so forth. Right? So excellent tool for not only reporting, for analysis of the data. It is also used in combinations with little bit of charts, and what we use with charts is what we call dashboards. Right? Any questions so far? Anything that you have on the report one? No? Any questions to the candidates who are online? Harmeet, Jay, Karan, Pavan, Samrat, Baswati, Amit? Any questions from any one of you? And see, this webinar is not only just to make you introduced to pivot table. If you guys have any questions from your work, you can ask me over here. No questions. Okay. So let's move on to the next report that we have to create. The next report says what was the total year and month wise invoice amount for each market. Okay, let's go back to the data. In the data we have markets, that is California, Canada, and so forth. Then we have got a invoice date in which we will know, okay, when was the invoice sent to a particular client, and then we have got the sales amount. If you look at the dates, right now the dates are in the format of a daily date. But what the report wants is in terms of years, in each year and in each month of that year, what was the invoice amount for each market, right? So how will we do this? So I'm going to do it on the same worksheet now. Okay, so insert table, pivot table. Now what kind of headers do we want to put over here? Again, let's not forget what I've been trying to emphasize, that visualize the output before you start with the pivot table. So how is the visualization? What kind of table are we looking for? Again grouped. Big fan of group table. Because we will have years, we will have months, and we will have markets.
Markets, then years and months.
Will it be a mixture of group and two ways?
It will be a mixture of two-way and a group table. Because I've got three things that I want to show. Now, if you give too much layering to your pivot table, again, it's very difficult to understand at times. So what we can do is we are going to put it as a two-way and a group table. So what should I put in the row? What should I put in the column? So I want markets.
First market.
Okay, then I want the invoice date. And I want the sales amount because I want to summarize the sales amount. So we pick sales amount and keep it over here.
Optional is of classification of main markets.
The main markets, yeah. Now these dates that are there, this is daily dates. How do I convert it into a year and a month? Now if you do not know pivot table strengths, one of the very important feature of pivot table is that it can group the dates and numbers for us to help us summarize the data in a much easier manner. Because if a person does not know this feature, what we end up doing is creating a new column in which we extract the year part, we extract the month, we make them as a field of our table, and then we pull and create a pivot table. However, this can be easily done by selecting one cell in the date, do a right click. There is a concept of group. In group, let this starting and ending be as it is because it picks the latest and the oldest date itself, and then you decide what do we want to group by. We can have grouping by a month, we can have a grouping by year or by both. So once we select both, we click OK. Automatically this is year wise, month wise, market wise sales report that we got. So in year 2007, in various months, what was the invoice amount for different markets? Right? Any questions at this point?
Ma'am, I'm just new to this class.
Yes.
I just want to understand first the basic things how you classifying the pivot table. The header, the row side, and the column. I was just not.
How do you decide what should drop in the header? And okay, see, there is no rule per se what should go in the row or what should go in the column, but normally what we try to do, anything which is going to be more items in your list. For example, if you talk about markets, so there are several markets over here, right? If you talk about regions, there are fewer regions that I have. So anything which is less should be kept ideally in a column part, which is this part. The reason being, our number of rows are much more than our number of columns. And normally when we read things in companies also, we don't like to go like this and come back and read, okay, this is a month and then go back again. So anything So anything which is less number of items, we like to put it in the row, and which is more number, which is more number of items would come in row, because we don't mind long tables, but which is less is going to come up over here. So that's the basic philosophy. Other than that, no such, there's no certain rule for that. Right? Any question? Anybody who online who has a question? No? Okay.
No, it's clear.
Let's move on to the next report, which is what is the percentage contribution of different business segments in each region? So I have different regions with me. Each region has multiple. In each region, there are the 3 business segments which are working. So I want to understand in each region which business segment is contributing to the total revenue. For, let's say, for example, of West region, out of the 3 business segments that I have, which one has a maximum contribution? Okay, so if I'm earning $1 lakh for a region North, then what percentage is coming from landscaping, what is coming from predictive maintenance, what is coming from fleet maintenance, and so on and so forth. Yes? So how will we create this? Sure. What is the percentage contribution of different business segments in each region?
First, we make a group table which was select.
So you want to go for a group table in which you want to show a region, and for each region you want to show the different business segments. Okay.
No, not the count, the sum of the sales.
Okay, let's do step by step. So let's do a pivot table first. Right? Going to the classic display. Now I wanted a region. I would ideally put a region in the column, and I would put either or business segment over here, because this is going to be a very small table. Okay, this is going to be a very small table and easier to read also, but if you make it a group table, it becomes very long. Okay, so this is a business segment and this is a region, and what I want to find is the total invoice sales amount. Right? Now I want to find out what percentage is of housekeeping, landscaping and maintenance repair in Midwest. So what we need to do is, what we are trying to aim is, basic calculation is going to be what? Basic calculation is going to be that if I divide this number 17451 divided by the total of this particular 18488. Now what is this called? This is called a column total. So I want to divide this number by a column total. And if you look on the right hand side, these numbers are called the row total, and the number over here is called the grand total. Now the manual calculation would have been that I divide this number by this. What is this kind of calculation, or what we are trying to achieve through this calculation is basically working in the same items of a field. What is the field I am working in? I am working in the region field. And in each region there are different items. So for Midwest I want to work, or North I want to work, or if you take about business segments, business segment is going to be a field and these are the items, and I'm working in the items of the same field. When you do something like that, then you are going to go to a specific area in pivot table. And what is that area? When you right click, you are going to see value field settings, and in value field settings you will see show value as. So the first tab that you see right now, which is summarize value by, it is used when you want to change the base function. If you remember, we spoke about when you drop a field which has text in it, it does by default count. There is no other way to replace that. But if I drop a field which has values, by default it used to do sum. If I want to change it, then this is a place we change it. The second tab which is available is show value as. In show value as, what we can do, we can work with the items of the same field. So show value as, if you click on the drop down, there are various kind of calculations that can be shown over here, like percentage of grand total. Grand total is the corner number that we get, which is the total of all the numbers. Column total are these over here. These are called the column totals. Then we have the row totals, which is going to be on the right side. Then we have percentage of, if it's a certain item that I want to take a percentage of. Percentage of parent total are used when you have a grouped setup or the group layout. So the subtotals that you get inside are called the parent total or column total. And then we have percentage difference from. Then you have running totals that you cumulatives that you want to get, and so on and so forth. Right? So what we want over here is a percentage of column total. Because like we said, if I had to do this calculation manually, how would I have done? This number divided by this number, which is a column total. And as soon as you click OK, it will automatically do that calculation. So for each region, if I want to figure out what is the contribution of different business segments, this would be the ideal way of doing it. Do you have any question? Anybody has a question? Normally what we like to do with the percentages, we like to see the numbers also, because sometimes percentages are not enough. So if I want to get my sales amount also over here along with the percentage, what will we do? We are going to pick the sales amount once again. So don't be afraid of putting one field in multiple places. So we can put the sales amount once again in this part. So I'll get two columns. One is going to be sales amount, one is going to be sales amount 2. And if I drop the third one, it will be sum of sales amount 3. We are going to change the name of these headers because then it will be more understandable. So this can be percentage contribution. And this one can be total sales, so that it makes more sense to read the data. So I get the total sales, I get the percentage contribution, and this makes it a complete report. Right? So very easy things that we would have done outside a pivot table, a manual calculation. And whenever you do manual calculation, you might think of your comfort zone that, oh, this is easy, I've been doing so many years. But you have to recognize this thing that anytime you're doing a manual work, errors are bound to happen. Okay, so why? And with the errors, then you have to be very good with dollar sign concepts, because you're going to copy paste after that. So if you want to get rid of all these things, you better be good in pivot table. And the only thing that you have to remember in pivot table to be good in it is where the features are kept. If I know exactly what is kept where, life is easy. Because otherwise, I think this is one of the very simplest tool that anybody could have created in Excel, which gives an output which is very, very good. Right? Any questions from anyone?
You made some formats.
No, it's clear.
Formats.
It's clear.
Okay, you make some formats.
You have made some formats, like two-way format, group format.
Yeah. Okay, I'll take you there. So the vertical table. So what we were, when we started this particular session, I said that when you are going to work in a pivot table, the way to go about is first visualize what you really want. Because if I know exactly what I want, that I want a vertical table in which the headers are on the top, data flows bottom, or horizontal tables where the headers are in a column and the data flows left to right, or a two-way table, or a group table, then if I know what I want, then I can make pivots in seconds. Because what comes over here are the headers. Headers are created by these items that you have inside a field, and what comes in this portion is basically the summarized value. So whatever is the summary all about, like in this case I wanted to count the business segment, so I dropped the business segment. In second case I wanted to find the invoice amount, sales amount, so I dropped the sales amount in that area. And then it was a percentage contribution, again percentage contribution based on amounts. So that's the reason we dropped in these areas the sales amount. So whatever headers are there, those come over here, summaries come up over here. Okay. And the last thing that we would like to see now, pivots, like I said, pivots should not be only a thing to make summary or reports, but it is an excellent tool for understanding or analyzing the data. And the way we can quickly analyze any given table to us in Excel is through charts, right? So we should always try to create a pivot table and chart. Now there is something called a dashboard. What is a dashboard? Very popular term these days in Excel world. It's a summary of what? Because again, you have to understand, if I have a data, I can analyze this data in 100 different ways, depending on what my need is. So what would a dashboard give you? Dashboard only gives you the key insight, what you want. I'll give you a very basic example when it comes to dashboard, the dashboard of your car. What does the dashboard of a car give you? How many kilometers we ran, what is the fuel tank, what is the status of it, whether the engine is hot or cold, right? What is the speed at which you're driving your car? How about it gave things like how much times the what is the axle is moving? Would you be interested? RPM. Would you be interested? What is the torque at which the force is being applied? Would you be interested as a rider of the car? Probably not. But that is also data. That is also insight, but not for us. So when you talk about the dashboard have to give you key insights into your data. But key insight would vary from person to person. Because as for example, if I'm a regional manager, probably I would like to analyze my data on a regional basis rather than going in a business segment. But if I'm a owner of a business segment and I want to see what's going on, probably I'll be concentrating on a business segment point of view, right? So let's create one simple dashboard. And again, why I'm teaching this as a part of a pivot table, because with the introduction of something called slicers since 2010 onwards in Excel, creating mini dashboards, a quick thing that I can use, you can use, anybody can make, has become very easy. Okay, but slices would only work, number one, if you have 2010 and above versions, and sometimes you make a mistake of putting the old data in the old format. Like for example, if I save this file as a .xls, which is the old format, and even if I'm opening in the new format, my slices would not show up. So make sure your extensions are also compatible with your versions that you have. So the question is, I want to create a small mini dashboard for a person so that he can analyze region wise analysis for various markets. Now what he can analyze in various markets is sales amount. Okay. So in each region, various markets, how is the sales doing? So what do we need? First of all, we need a pivot table. So what do we need in this pivot table? We want region wise and market wise sales amount. How will we create this?
We put region filters.
Region wise, market wise, sales amount. So I need region, I want market, and I want the sales amount. Right? One way of analyzing would be that I give this table to the person and I say, okay, this is what I got. But easier way and better way, especially when you're giving it to your N+1 higher management or your clients, is in a easy to use graphical manner. Okay. Imagine, I keep giving this example. Imagine if you had to book the airline ticket or a train ticket, and instead of a simple drop down of the start station and the end station, you had a table from where you had to pick and choose and then do certain calculations to get you an output. You would not be in the comfort zone. So what we do is, we are going to quickly, I'm going to create a sheet in which I'm going to make it easier for the user to analyze this table itself. So number one, I want a slicer. Now what is a slicer and how do I get it? So if you are in your pivot table, if you go to this portion of pivot table which is called analyze, and this will only come when you are inside the pivot table. Inside that, you will see something called insert slicer and insert timeline. So if you click on insert slicer, these are what? These are again the fields of your data. I want to create a slicer of what? I want to do region wise market analysis. So what should the slicer be about? It should be for region. Because if I pick one region, I should get the corresponding markets to it. And I click OK. So this is what is called a slicer. Now normally, like I'm telling you again and again, with the dashboard of the car, if I give you a running numbers, a table, continuous tables that are coming, would you like it? Too much data interference? No. I want neat and clean. So we'll cut it and place it in some other worksheet. Okay. So I put the regions out over here. Now what I want is the chart which can help me to analyze region-wise sales. So either you can create a chart over here or you could have created chart in this table and then again same way cut and paste. So insert, let's say this is my chart, I cut it and I place it next to my slicer. Okay. Now what I'm getting for all the regions, these are the markets and how's the performance. So for all the regions, West region is doing for all the different markets, West region is doing well. If I talk only in Midwest there are three markets, which is Denver, Kansas City and Tulsa. And in Tulsa, which is the best? Denver is the best. If I go to the South region, I have got four markets and which is doing the best? Florida is doing the best. I could have shown in terms of bars, or if I'm trying to see the composition, a percentage contribution of the markets to the region, then you could have also changed this into a pie chart, right? And put some labels on top of it so that you get the values and then further format them to get the percentages. So all this we can do. So now I'm getting for the South region the percentage contribution of each market. For the North region, again, all these have to be done first. The percentage contribution for the Midwest, the percentage contribution. If I want to pick more than one, press your control key and pick the two. It will give you a composition of both of them. If I want to get rid of the selections I've made, then you will see there is a filter on the top out over here. So if you click on the filter, then it comes back over here. Right? So this is how you work with simple, good, very quick dashboard for your peers, for your N+1, very neat and clean, where they don't need to know anything about pivot tables or what kind of calculations you are doing in the back end. All they have to do is press, get the answer and be happy with the output. Right? So these are some of the features. So these are not only features that we use in pivots, we do a lot more. And like I was telling, now initially what used to happen was that we had a large amount of data, and in Excel the challenge is that we store different kind of data in different workbooks. It is related, but we keep it in different workbooks, right? Because we can't put everything in one worksheet. It will make it cumbersome, too difficult to understand, too large amount of data. And then when we had to create a pivot table, which would link one workbook with another workbook, what we used to do is run a VLOOKUP. VLOOKUP, then create it, and then create a pivot table. Now those days have gone because we have got something called Power Pivots. Right? So these sessions, these webinar sessions that are going to continue in IB are going to finally take you to a Power Pivot, because before we touch upon Power Pivots, you should have a good concept of pivot tables. Once you know pivot tables and you know the concept of databases and you know the concept how VLOOKUP really works, then working in a pivot table and Power Pivots is going to be very, very fruitful. So that's about it for today. Like I said, this is not the entire pivot table that we have touched upon. There are a lot of features that we can talk about in this, but in this webinar, because of the time constraint, this is what we are going to cover today. Any questions from anyone? Pavan, Samrat, Karan, Harmeet, Baswati, Amit. Any
We
questions
are
for you guys?
very good.
No questions? Any questions from the audience in front of me? No? Okay. Okay, thank you guys for this time. And again, if you have any questions, some of you already know my name and my credentials. My name is Ishani, and if you want to connect with me, you can always drop me an email at ishani.agrawal@ivproschool.com, and I can definitely, help you out. Anytime you want to connect with me, especially related to your work questions, then you guys need to send me a sample data set because every data changes and to visualize verbally or on an email is a difficult concept. So send me a small data set because confidentiality concept is there in each and every organization. Make a dummy data set and then ask a question. It's going to be easier and a faster way of answering to you guys. Okay? Okay. Thank you so
Okay.
much and I'll see you then. Bye bye.
Bye.